Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're going to give folks a couple minutes while we get started. So just hang tight and we'll get started in about 2 or 3 minutes. Thanks to the folks that have joined us. We still have folks filtering in, so going to give it 1 more minute and then I'll go ahead and get us started. All right, well, let's go ahead. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me this evening. My name is Persis. I'm with the Student Borrower Protection Center. I am here with my colleague, Amy, who you're going to see a little bit later. She's helping me collate your questions. Tonight, we are discussing navigating debt relief for borrowers with the older federal student loans, especially those with federal family education loans or FFELP loans. Loans that were made by private lenders like Sallie Mae, but were guaranteed by the federal government. We're going to talk specifically about the relief through President Biden's recent announcement of up to $20,000. We're also going to talk about public service loan forgiveness program, and finally going to spend a little bit of time talking about income during payment and the recently announced IDR account adjustment. I'm going to try to walk you through these various different programs, but I want to acknowledge from the start that there is a lot of jargon here and these programs are super complicated. We will be sending out this recording at the end, but we also have a lot of resources and FAQs on our website, cancellmystudentaid.gov. That's cancellmystudentaid.gov. This website is a joint project of the Student Borrower Protection Center, the American Federations of Teachers, the National Education Association, AFSCME, International Brotherhood of Teamsters, American Association of University Professors, and the National Association of Social Workers. In coordination with all of these groups, we are working together to make sure that every student loan borrower has access to the information to get the debt relief they need and are entitled to under law. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. All right. I do want to sorry, I just said I was going to jump right in, but I'm going to, before we start, I want to apologize for the amount of jargon. I'm going to try to break it all down for you. But for some folks, I know that this is the first time you're learning some of this information and learning some of these terms and about these programs. So as things come up, please do put your questions in the Q&A box. We're going to try to get to them at the end. So who is a FFELP borrower? So the FFELP program, the Federal Family Education Loan Program, is the program where commercial banks and lenders would make federal loans to students, and they were guaranteed by the federal government. So lenders essentially made money whether or not borrowers paid them or not. This was largely determined to be a bad deal for the government, so Congress eliminated the FFEL lending program in 2010. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that there's still millions of borrowers with loans from this defunct program. Most of you who are joined us this evening are going to be folks who have these kinds of loans. So how do you tell what kind of loans you have? Basically, the bottom line is that you're going to need to go to studentaid.gov to find out what kind of FFELP loans find out what kind of loans you have and what kind of FFELP loans do you have. I've been working with borrowers for over a decade now, and whenever I have asked a borrower, what kind of loan do you have? Very invariably, they will say, I don't know, I have a Navient loan, or I have, a loan with AES. So but that's not actually very helpful because those are servicers and they actually service all different types of loans. So studentaid.gov is your guide. It is your source for information, and it will also give you all of your federal loans, right? So you might have a loan with Navient, but you might also have a loan with Nelnet and not really know what the difference between the two of them is. And so studentaid.gov is going to be the place where you're going to get this information. What are you going to look for? You're going to look for some keywords as these loans are described, and I'll kind of walk you through them a little bit more in just a couple moments. But the federal family education loans will start with the words either FFEL or Stafford. Perkins loans is another kind of older defunct loan product, and these were originated by schools. Those will have the words Perkins in it. Now, one of the things that's really important as a FFEL borrower is to know that there's a distinction between the loans that are held by the government, right? So that means that maybe they were originated by Navient, but then Navient assigned it to the Department of Education. So it's still a department held loan versus the ones that are still commercially held. And so those are the ones where Navient is still your lender for those loans. And so kind of the ways to figure out the distinction between the federally managed and the commercially held is whether or not, as you're looking, does your servicer start with the Department of Education or default management collection system, or does it just have the name of a lender? And I will go through and kind of like walk you through that a little bit. The reason that this is important is because in a number of programs, the benefits will be determined by who owns your loan, which is not necessarily fair because you have no control over it, but that is how it goes. So how to tell what kind of federal loan you go to. Like I said, go to studentaid.gov and view your dashboard. This is kind of what it's going to basically look like. You're going to see a list of the various different kinds of loans and their loan balances. Then this is, if you kind of dive into each of the different loans, you're going to see that the ed held loans will say something like Department of Education and then the name of a servicer. So you'll see that right here at the bottom one. And then whereas the other ones that will say just the name of a private bank or servicer. So you see Wells Fargo and American Education Services. And then the last, but you'll have the direct loans will say direct loans specifically. So for a more granular look, you can download your loan data to see this. And that's going to give you this very complicated text file, but it's going to give you a whole lot of information about the kind of loans that you have. So most people will get what they need off of just the regular dashboard, but some people may need to get into that very granular level of detail. Okay, so how to tell, so that's kind of the recap of, you go onto studentaid.gov, you look for these keywords. The other kind of like key way to tell what kind of loan you have is just that, was it paused by the payment suspension or not? So as we said before, you can have a mixture of these loans, right? So you could have a direct loan, you could have a FFELP loan, you could have a FFELP loan that's owned by the Department of Education and a FFELP loan that is owned by a private lender. All of these things are possible, and they will be listed out on studentaid.gov, and hopefully you can get that information. Again, like I said, the reason why this is so important is because for a lot of the programs we're going to be talking about, who owns your loans is going to be very important to determine what kind of relief you get. All right, so let's dive into the big one, cancellation. So as many of you know, on August 24th of this last summer, the president announced a massive debt relief program, which is going to result in over 20 million borrowers having their loans completely canceled. For everyone else, they're going to see their loan balances eliminated by either $10,000 or $20,000 for those who received a Pell Grant. This relief is available for borrowers who in either 2020 or 2021 had taxable income of less than $125,000 for individuals or $250,000 for households. Importantly, people must apply. This is not automatic relief. There is an application. It is live at studentaid.gov. And just as of this morning, there is now a paper application that folks can download as well. Now we're going to go into the other cancellation programs, and this does not replace the importance of public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment. The other thing that folks need to be aware of is that there are a lot of people trying to capitalize off of confusion in the student loan system. It is confusing. It's understandable if you get confused, but know that there are folks who are going to try to get you to pay to help with that application. Know that this application is free. There are folks, who can help you if you need it. There are some folks who have very complicated student loan situations. They may need to get assistance, but you should know that no one is going to call you and demand money to help you with your student loans. If somebody does that, they are most likely a scam. All right, so going into the eligibility, right? Because we talked about the eligibility of the borrower based upon their income, but what about which loans are eligible? So all of the direct loan program loans are eligible for cancellation under the president's announcement. So that's direct loans that are subsidized, direct loans that are unsubsidized. Parent Plus loans are eligible. I've been hearing a lot of rumors that Parent Plus borrowers are not eligible for this cancellation. That's not true. They are, as long as they have they're otherwise eligible loans. Graduate loans, consolidation loans, as long as the underlying loans were consolidated, which were first dispersed, were dispersed before June 30th, 2022. So that means that people who were in school last year, for example, are eligible for this cancellation. Now, especially important for this crowd, right? FFEL loans. Some FFEL loans qualify, some FFEL loans don't, right? So if you have a FFELP loan that is held by the Department of Education, again, going back to studentaid.gov, seeing if you have Department of Ed on that list, then your loan is eligible. If you have a defaulted loan, whether or not it is held by the Department of Education or it is held by the private guarantee agency, that loan is covered. Federal Perkins loans are only covered if they're held by the Department of Education, and all defaulted loans, that is both all defaulted Stafford loans, let me be more specific. So including ed held and commercially held FFEL are included. Basically, in short, if your loans benefited from the pause on payments since March 2020, they are covered by this announcement. I want to give this warning now, and I'm going to give this warning again later. And this is the most recent best information that we have, but as of September 29th, 2022, a very, very key date in the cancellation announcement world is that any loans that were consolidated after that date, which included commercially held FFEL loans or Perkins loans, are going to be excluded from this debt cancellation, even if they are including loans that were held by the Department of Education. So we've been calling this the one bad apple problem, right? So if you consolidate after September 29th, 2022, any loan that is ineligible with a loan that is eligible, your new consolidated loan will be ineligible for debt cancellation. However, that does not affect the eligibility for public service loan forgiveness or income-driven repayment. And so we're going to go into those programs. We're going to have a discussion at the end to kind of talk about whether or not consolidation makes sense anyways. But that is an important warning on consolidation loans right now. All right, so diving into public service loan forgiveness. All right, so Congress created the Public Service Loan Program back in 2007 to help public service workers who were struggling with student debt and to make sure that future students and graduates wouldn't be deterred from entering public service by their student loan balances. So simply put, public service loan forgiveness is the promise that if a borrower works in public service and makes payments for 10 years, the remainder of their debt will be forgiven. But as we will see, it is certainly much more complicated than that. So how does PSLF actually work? More than simply working in public service for 10 years, there are normally in normal times 4 specific criteria. You have to have the right kind of loan. You have to have a direct loan. Second, you have to be in the correct repayment plan, for which the program is generally, and for this program, it's generally an income-driven repayment plan. Third, you need to work in a public service field. And finally, you need to make more than 120 qualifying payments. That's 10 years worth, but it is not 10 calendar years. They are actually counting month by month. So I'll drill down on some of these for a moment. So there have been some changes to the public service loan forgiveness program. So they're temporary changes. So in October of 2021, the Department of Education announced a PSLF waiver, which technically expired just a couple days ago on October 31st of this past year, but most of the benefits of this waiver have been extended. So essentially what the department's waiver does is it gives public service workers credit towards loan forgiveness, regardless of what type of federal student loan they had, for periods of time since October 1st, 2007, when the program began, as long as they were also in qualifying public service employment and their loan was not in default, deferment, or forbearance. I'm going to put a small asterisk on the default or deferment or forbearance piece, and we'll get to that a little bit later on. Even for months in which the borrowers did not actively make payments, as long as the loan was in repayment status, they can receive credits. These credits will be retroactive, so borrowers can receive credits for past payments that were previously ineligible. In short, any months since October 1st, 2007, that a borrower had any type of federal loan, worked for a qualifying public service employer, and was not in default, deferment, or forbearance, that borrower can receive credit towards the 120 months required for loan forgiveness under PSLF. However, this waiver is not completely automatic. Normally, PSLF requires that borrowers have a specific loan type, direct loans, as we discussed. Although the waiver allows borrowers with any loan type to get credit, those without direct loans must take some steps to convert their loans into direct loans through a process called consolidation, though they will still get credit for a time before the consolidation. Also, almost all borrowers, regardless of their loan types, will have to certify with the Department of Education any periods of qualifying public service they have worked since October 1st, 2007. Basically, if the government doesn't know that you did qualifying work, it cannot award you the right credits. There is a very important deadline to act. Now, I talked about the PSLF waiver, which technically expired on October 31st, 2023, that has been extended by the IDR account adjustment, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But it is very important that there is a new deadline. That deadline is May 1st, 2023. Borrowers with loans that are not currently eligible must consolidate by that date in order to get credit for the time prior to consolidation. With that in mind, there are 3 things all public service workers with federal student loans should do. All right, so here is the checklist. To figure out how this special waiver applies to you and what steps you need to take, every borrower should do 3 things. We'll talk about each, but briefly they are: confirm your past and present employers are qualifying public service employers, determine your loan types and consolidate if necessary, and third, certify your employment. All right, so is your employer a qualified public service employer? Nothing about this particular requirement changed during the waiver. You still need to do public service. And importantly, you can certify time for past employment. However, you do need to be employed in qualifying employment at the time that you apply for forgiveness after your 120 payments. So qualifying employers include any government employer, federal, state, local, tribal, and any nonprofits that have a 501c3 tax exempt status. There are certain other nonprofits that also qualify. However, unions and political organizations do not, nor do any for-profit employers. If you're not sure whether or not your employer qualifies as a public service employer for PSLF, the Department of Education maintains a list that you can search. It's important to note, though, that this is not a necessarily exhaustive list. So if your employer does not appear, but you still believe that they are a qualifying public service employer, you can proceed with the PSLF process. You can access this list by going to the PSLF help tool available at studentaid.gov. You'll hear that word studentaid.gov a lot throughout this presentation. The employer database is the first step in the help tool, so you can quickly access it to check to see whether or not your past and present employers qualify. All right, step 2. What types of federal loans do you have? The 3 major types that most folks have today are direct loans, FFELP loans, and Perkins loans. For public service workers to get forgiveness on their FFEL and Perkins loans under the PSLF waiver, they will have to consolidate. This is like refinancing. Those loans will then become a direct loan. It's important to remember that what's special about the waiver is that normally when you consolidate your loans, you lose any past credit towards forgiveness. But during this waiver, up until May 1st, any past time will be counted if you consolidate it into a new loan. And then finally, the third step, the third thing that you need to do is certify your employment using the public service loan forgiveness form. So again, remember, qualifying employers are any level of government, 501c3 nonprofit employers, and other certain nonprofit employers. The form to do this is called the PSLF form. It was previously called the Employment Certification Form, but they've renamed it. Borrowers should certify their employment using the PSLF help tool, which is the same tool that they can use to confirm their past and current employers qualify them for PSLF. That tool will generate the form for you, which your employer will need to sign. If you have any more, that's our last slide specifically on the PSLF process. But if you have additional questions, we have webinars specifically about PSLF in which we're going to get into more details about the process and walk you through all of these steps in depth. There are also videos and FAQs on cancellmystudentdebt.org. So the next thing we're going to go into is the income during payment and IDR account adjustment. So what is income during payment? So income during payment is kind of the category of repayment plans that allow borrowers to make monthly payments based upon their income and cancels any remaining debt after 20 or 25 years of qualifying payments. Again, we have that word qualifying payments. So there is a truly alphabet soup of income during repayment plans. I'm not going to describe each one of them in detail because that would take the remainder of our hour. But I think the important thing I want you to take away is they all work in somewhat of a similar way. There's kind of like a set model of how they work. And what it is that your monthly payment is calculated based upon a percentage of income, of your income, and then whatever is remaining after some set period of time is canceled. The percentage taken and the amount of time to cancellation differs by payment plan. And which plan you were eligible for is based upon both your loan type and when you took it out. You'll notice kind of on this list that direct loans are eligible for the more generous IDR plans than the FFELP loans are. So this is another reason why, just in general, it may be advantageous for you to consolidate your loans into the direct loan program. So the income-driven repayment or IDR account adjustment announcement. So this was an announcement that was made back in April, much like the it works in a very similar way to the public service loan forgiveness waiver, in that is a one-time revision or adjustment of direct and FFEL qualifying payments. So what it's doing, so PSLF, if you think about PSLF and IDR in a very similar way, is if you have qualifying payments and then you have an amount of time that you need to get to cancellation, they've both failed in similar ways in that borrowers have had a hard time accessing this. So what the government has done is they're going to look backwards. They're going to look backwards through your entire payment history and kind of recount payments to whether to be qualifying payments under income during payment. So So they're going to count time made on both direct loans and FFEL loans. The time that's going to count is any time in repayment status. This is very much like the PSLF waiver. So anytime you've been in the status of repayment that's on an extended payment plan, a graduated payment plan, the standard payment plan, and it also includes time periods of non-payment as long as you had not yet slipped into default. Now, one of the things that distinguishes the IDR account adjustment from the earlier PSLF waiver is that it does count some deferment and forbearance time. So if you have 12 consecutive months of forbearances, or you have a total of 36 or more cumulative forbearance months, they will count all of your forbearance time as a qualifying payment. Any deferments that you took on prior to 2013 also counts as a qualifying payment. The reason for these kind of like nuances and weird numbers and weird ways they're counting is that they are trying to address systemic servicing problems that have happened largely in the past of forbearance steering and mismanagements of counts prior to 2013. Now, one of the things that's really exciting about this is if you have been in these repayment, if you have been in repayment for more than the 20 or 25 years, you will actually get a refund of any amount over, like once after that threshold has been crossed. The other really exciting thing about the IDR account adjustment is that any of the payments that are made that become a qualifying payment under income during payment also become a qualifying payment for public service loan forgiveness. So this is the little asterisk that I was mentioning earlier about why some forbearance and deferment time will count. It's not going to be all deferment and forbearance time because that would be too easy. But if you meet these kind of like buckets of forbearance and deferments, then that time can be converted for credit towards public service loan forgiveness. Like the PSLF waiver, you will, if you consolidate, you will get time for any of the repayment time prior to consolidation. That is, if you consolidate prior to the May 1st, 2023 deadline. Now, importantly, if you have an ed-held FFEL loan, you do not need to consolidate to take advantage of the IDR account adjustment, though you will if you want to take advantage of public service loan forgiveness. But if you have a commercially held FFEL loan, then you must consolidate your loans in order to take advantage of the IDR account adjustment. Because all FFEL loans are at least 12 years old, this is going to give a lot of folks a significant amount of credit towards that 20 or 25 years of cancellation. So it's definitely a thing that folks with FFEL loans should think about, should consider on whether or not they should consolidate their loans. So I've talked a lot about consolidating your loans. Let's finally dive into what does that look like. If you have non-direct loans or non-ed held loans, you very well may want to consolidate them. We'll go through a little bit process at the end just to kind of like hash out when, what you want to consider. So what do? All right, again, we're going to go to studentaid.gov. Hover over the managing loans section on the website, and there's going to be a drop-down menu, and you're going to click on consolidate my loans on that list. So it's going to bring you to the consolidation application. It will then guide you through the steps that you'll need to take, which include selecting the loans you want to include in the consolidation, confirming the amount and the rate of the new loans, selecting the repayment plan and your servicer, and then signing for the loan. So for those of you pursuing public service loan forgiveness, MOHELA is the dedicated servicer for PSLF. When you file your PSLF forms, your account will automatically be moved to MOHELA. So you might as well select them here too if you're going for PSLF, and then you only have to deal with one loan transfer and not two. Now, here is a tip that's specific to the waiver. If you have a mixture of older loans and newer loans, and so some of the loans would be closer to the 10 years needed for PSLF or the 20 or 25 years needed for income during payment. If you consolidate all of those loans together, the new loans will be awarded as much credit towards forgiveness as your oldest existing loan. So again, if you consolidate old and new loans, when the consolidation is ultimately forgiven, the entire amount will be forgiven. So this is very useful information for folks who have older FFEL loans, but may have newer direct loans. You may not think to consolidate your direct loans into the loan because they already qualify, but if you do consolidate them, they could be forgiven on the faster timeline set by the older FFEL loans. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical trouble here. Okay. So remember, for the regular public service loan forgiveness, you need to be enrolled in an income dream payment plan. So when you're consolidating, it's a good idea to select one of the income dream payment plans as your plans. These, as we had mentioned before, include income-based repayment, income contingent payment, pay as you earn, and repay. This is also true for the IDR account adjustment, that if you don't quite have your 10 years for PSLF or your 10 or your 20 or 25 years for IDR, that you're going to need to essentially get into one of these income dream payment plans to kind of ride out the remainder of your cancellation time. So this is just, again, to kind of reiterate the quick PSLF hack that all FFEL borrowers should know. Right now, mixing older and newer loans, when you consolidate them together, will give the loan as much credit as the oldest loan, meaning you can piggyback your time towards 120 payments on the towards forgiveness. But again, I told you I would raise this slide again for you. There's a warning that as of September 29th, any new consolidation loans that include the commercially held FFEL loans or Perkins loans with loans that are owned by the government will miss out on the $10,000 or $20,000 in new cancellation. Now, again, this does not affect PSLF. It does not affect IDR. If you consolidate your loans, those loans will continue to be eligible for PSLF or IDR, but they will not be eligible for the debt relief announced by President Biden. So you may still want to consolidate your loans, right? So some of the things that I think are helpful for folks to think about when making this decision, if you have a mixture of loans, about whether or not you should, forego the cancellation on the ed held loans, in order to consolidate your loans, is thinking about the amount of debt that you have and the length of your payment history. There may be, for a number of borrowers, this $10,000 or $20,000 may not actually, it may not actually make a difference in kind of in the long run about how much you're paying for these loans, especially if you're very close to cancellation on PSLF or IDR. It very may well just be worthwhile to consolidate them all together, get credit for that time, and then have your entire loan balances canceled in a short amount of time. Certainly, if you've hit the 10 years or the 20 or 25 years, get your whole loans canceled, right, through consolidation. But it is kind of a delicate balance of to consider right now. There may also be, you do have a little bit of time. May 1st is not super far away, but you may have some time to kind of figure out also if there is a pathway to get cancellation on some of the loans first and then do the consolidation later. So that may also be something to consider. Now, there are some other considerations for consolidation. There may be some downsides. For most borrowers, the benefits of IDR and PSLF are going to outweigh the downsides. But there are some things to think about in terms of if you have a lot of outstanding interest, you may see your interest grow. The one piece that I will say is there are some folks, a very, very, very small sliver of folks, for whom there may be kind of legal issues going on with your loans. Were you a victim of identity theft? Did you go to a school that defrauded you? Those folks should probably seek out legal counsel in terms of whether or not you should consolidate. But in general, the Department of Education has a page to kind of help you walk through the pros and the cons of consolidation. So that is, again, at studentaid.gov/manage loans consolidation. All right. So just to kind of summarize the important takeaways of what we learned tonight. First, find out what kind of FFELP loan you have. Basically, from there, what kind of relief you are entitled to is going to flow from whether or not it is an ed held or it is a commercially held FFELP loan. So weigh your options for getting your debt canceled with your older and newer loans if you're consolidating them together, right? So importantly, if you consolidate them together, you may lose out on President Biden's student debt cancellation announcement. However, you may gain access to public service loan forgiveness or the IDR account adjustment. And in general, you will have access to the more generous benefits of the direct loan program, such as you may qualify for the new income during payment plan that has been that is supposed to come out soon, though we don't have all the details, and even some of the other existing repayment plans. Now, the other thing is that sometimes things do go wrong. And we know that many of the reasons why we have the public service loan forgiveness waiver and the IDR account adjustment is because we know that sometimes servicers have screwed up, things have gone wrong. That is why we have these things. But if you experience any issues, you should file a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau with at the feedback center with the Department of Education and with your state attorney general. So that is the last bit of content that I have for folks. But at this point, Amy is going to join us back on camera, and we're going to go through some questions.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks, Persis. The first thing I want to state is that we are recording this webinar and we'll be sending it out tomorrow with some follow-up resources. So stay tuned for that. But we've been getting some really good questions. The first set of questions is really about that September 29th announcement.
Yeah.
If someone didn't make the deadline to apply for consolidation by September 29th, is there anything they can do to,
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, so I know that a lot of folks were, I think, disappointed that probably does not even really cover the feelings and very legitimate feelings of anger that people have when, the administration very suddenly announced that they were going to cut off access to consolidation for this benefit. One of the things that the administration has said that they are going to do is that they are working with FFEL lenders to try to work out some kind of deal where FFEL borrowers can get cancellation through their lenders. That has not yet been announced. It's a thing that both the lenders and the administration say that they are continuing to work on. So there is some time for folks to try to think about whether or not they want to wait to see if that kind of announcement is coming. But of course, there is a deadline, so don't wait too long. And, I think then you just have to kind of like weigh the pros and cons about whether or not consolidation is worthwhile, even without the cancellation. So there probably is some amount of time that one can wait, but don't miss the May 1st deadline if you wanted to hit, because you want to take advantage of the IDR account adjustment for sure, but especially also if you want to take advantage of public service loan forgiveness.
Thanks, Persis. And along that same topic, if you applied for a consolidation before September 29th, is that sufficient or did it have to be processed?
That's a great question. So the threshold is applying. So especially if you applied through studentaid.gov and you generated some kind of digital record prior to September 29th, your loan should still qualify. We're still kind of seeking out guidance about folks who may have submitted paper applications and they're sent in the mail. That we will, keep you up to date. Again, cancel my student debt. We have FAQs as we learn about them. But if you did it through studentaid.gov and you can have the digital kind of like timestamp on that application, that is sufficient. It does not need to be processed.
Thanks, Persis. We got some questions about loan type. So if a person is seeing that they have a FFELP loan on their Navigant account, but when they log into studentaid.gov, it's not there, what might that mean?
That's a really interesting question. And so any of your federal loans should appear on studentaid.gov. Now, I will say that certainly for old loans, which of course would more likely be FFELP loans, there was some period of time in which, loans were not, and I'm talking like 80s old loans might not appear. If you are in that circumstance, I would say that that's probably a time to kind of like raise your hand and talk to the Federal Student Aid Ombudsman. Because that's probably an issue with your studentaid.gov account. And so that's one that I would flag for the ombudsman.
Thanks, Persis. Someone paid off their loans in 2020 and they wanted to know more about the refund process.
Yeah, so that has been, the refund process actually predates the cancellation announcement. So in March 2020, right, when payments were suspended, what happened is it took a while for folks to realize that they didn't have to make payments. Now, of course, these are folks with ed-held loans. And so some people continue to make payments anyway. So the department at that point implemented a policy that said that any payments that were made during the payment suspension could be refunded. When, some borrowers may have chosen during the payment pause to pay off their loans because there was no interest, that, there's a number of different reasons, and because many people did not realize that cancellation was going to become a thing. And so since the cancellation announcement, what we have learned is the department is going to continue to allow people who have made payments on ed-held loans to get a refund of any payments made during the payment suspension, so that they can get the credit for cancellation. If you made payments and you applied and you have less than the $10,000 or $20,000 remaining balance, my understanding is that they are going to automatically refund any amounts too. But certainly, if you made payments, you want the refund, you can go ahead, contact your servicer, and request that refund.
Thanks so much, Persis. What if someone is currently enrolled in classes and they're going to graduate, in the next year? Would they be eligible for cancellation?
So the cutoff date is that any loans that were originated, their first origination date was before June 30th, 2022. Any of those loans can count. So if you're currently enrolled, certainly there is no prohibition on people who are currently enrolled in school taking advantage of this, but the only loans that it can apply to are loans that you took out before this academic year. So if you took out loans for prior years, those loans will be eligible for cancellation.
Thanks, Persis. And then we have some questions on PSLF too. So do you still have to be currently working in order to apply?
So this is a nuanced question here. So you do not need to be currently working in order to get credit for past employment. The trick, though, is at the moment when you're applying for that final cancellation, you've reached your 120 payments and you want to get the whole thing canceled, you do need to be employed in qualifying employment at that point. So I would say, if you had past employment, it's still probably worth getting that time counted, right? Because those credits will go with you forever. They're not going to go away after the waiver, after that May 1st deadline. But you're not going to be able to get that final cancellation unless you were employed. So, take advantage, get the credits, get them counted. And then if you, anytime in the future, you are working in qualifying employment, that's the point at which you can, obviously if you have 7 years, even if you're not working now, it is certainly worth getting that credit because in the future you may get more. But even if you have the 120, get credit. If at any point you are then again working full-time and qualifying employment, you could then at that point apply for cancellation.
Awesome, Persis. Another question on PSLF. So if someone's loan consolidation application is still pending, but they've sent their, employment certification forms in, should they send them again if they haven't heard anything? Or, what should they do?
Yeah, so I think this is unfortunately like a very, very common situation right now. In order to take advantage of the waiver, things needed to be started, but not necessarily processed, which means that, MOHELA and the Department of Education is operating under a crush of applications right now and is taking an exceptionally long time. There is some period of time, which I think is reasonable to wait. I don't know, Amy, if you know whether or not like what they have been, whether or not they've announced kind of like their common processing time. I have certainly seen applications last like take months.
And I think they're saying like 4 months now, maybe, or something akin to that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'd say certainly, hang tight for a while, but I think it's very important to keep an eye on the calendar for that May 1st deadline, because if something did not go right, that's the point at which it is really like critical to resend the documents. I think the other piece of information, I mean, this is probably good information, just like good advice for life, but like send things in a way in which you can document the timing of them, right? If you can get, get your employment certification, get it signed, make sure to, have copies of this on hand. There are a lot of as getting your foot in the door is kind of the first key step, and then many problems can kind of be sorted out later on the back end. But document.
Thanks, Persis. One person on the call said they've been in repayment for a very long time, about 20 years, and then they consolidated, and then they were in repayment for another 20 years. Is there something that they should be doing in order to take advantage of the IDR account adjustment?
That's a great question. And the IDR account adjustment was really designed for that exact scenario in mind. The IDR account adjustment should happen automatically. That is what the department has said. If you already have, so first of all, you have to have an ed held loan, right? So that's step number one. Make sure you have an ed held loan. Go to studentaid.gov, verify that it is held by the Department of Education. If not, consolidate your loan. And then the next thing is just to kind of, if you can, do your own track of like, what do you think those qualifying payments should be? What's going to happen is you have that May 1st deadline to apply for consolidation. Any consolidation application that happens after that May 1st deadline will not be counted for the account adjustment. What you can expect to happen at some point next, which the department has said that they plan to do in July of 2023, is that they're automatically going to do the account adjustment. You should see on studentaid.gov the new count of your qualifying payments. And if you have done that, you should see your loans automatically canceled at that point. There is some question, I'm not sure how this works they're going to try to expedite people who have actually crossed the threshold. And so I would say basically the sooner the better. Because they are going to try to get people who have actually qualified for cancellation. They're going to try to do those applications first, so that people don't have to go back into repayment on January 1st when the federal payment pause ends.
Thanks, Persis. Another question about the IDR account adjustment. So someone had loans from 1995, and they consolidated them. They were commercial FFELP loans. They consolidated them in 2003. And then if they consolidate again to do a direct consolidation loan, will the months prior to 2003 count, towards the IDR account adjustment?
My understanding is that they should count towards, yes, that all repayment time, even pre-consolidation time, should count towards the IDR account adjustment. This is another place where I think, again, get your documents in a row, right? Because one of the reasons why the IDR account adjustment exists is because payment histories with these lenders, especially these really old loans, is really terrible. So get as much documentation as you can in case something goes wrong. But my understanding is that yes, any pre-consolidation time should count.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so a different line of questioning. Some people are wondering if there's any relief for people with disabilities.
That's an excellent question. And so, there is a program through the Department of Education called the Total and Permanent Disability Program. Despite its name, it does not need to be permanent. The department determines that you have a qualifying disability. If you have a disability that has lasted for 60 months, is expected to last for 60 months, which prevents you from engaging in substantial employment. There are some ways that the Department of Education has automated that in recent past. So if you have certain Social Security disability ratings, the department may automatically grant you that cancellation, but you can also go to your doctor to get a doctor's form to certify on a specific Department of Education form about your disability as well. So again, studentaid.gov is a place that you can go to for that information. Nelnet is also the disability discharge servicer. So they have some information on that website as well.
Thanks, Persis. Somebody has a question about interest rates. So when they went to consolidate, the interest rate, almost doubled when they were looking at their interest rates. Can you speak to what people should be looking for when they're consolidating and thinking about interest rates in general?
Yeah, so the way that the interest rates are supposed to work when you consolidate your loans, and this is a little bit what I was alluding to, like some of the potential downsides. And they'll spell this out a little bit more if you go to studentaid.gov and go to that website about the pros and cons. But the way that the interest rates are supposed to be calculated following a consolidation is it's supposed to be a weighted average of your interest rates. So if you had I'm not gonna be able to do the math on the fly, sorry. But so if you had like 40% of your loans are one type of have one interest rate, and 60% of your loans have a different interest rate, it's not going to just be the average of the two. It's going to be somewhere where like it will try to do the weight of the 40 and the 60. Now, the reason why you might see your interest rate actually still double though is because a lot of the FFEL lenders have had kind of like interest rate benefits, right? If you had signed up for a direct deposit, for example, there are certain reasons why you might have had kind of like a lower interest rate than what you have actually been charged because of different like benefits and programs that your FFEL lender might have. And so that's a reason why you might see it. But the way that it's supposed to work is that, it should be the weighted average of your interest rates based upon, kind of like what they were set at when they were originated.
Thanks so much. Okay, moving back to PSLF. So if you made over 120 payments on your FFEL loans, so if you made, like over 120, would you get a refund for those payments?
So I believe that you only get the refund on payments made on ed held loans is the answer. This is one that you might want to verify. I know that we have the answer to that on cancellmystudentdebt.org.
Amazing. Thank you. And what if a person has two jobs that are part-time and they equal 30 hours? Would that qualify for PSLF?
Yes, you can combine two separate employers. You're going to have to get an employment certification from both of them and kind of submit them together so that they can kind of do the math together. But if you can show that you have full-time employment, even if it's by a combination of qualifying employers, that will also work.
Thanks, Persis. And is there an income limit for any of the income-driven repayment plans?
So yes and no. Effectively, some of the payment plans wind up not being useful, essentially, if you make over a certain income, right? So with income-based repayment and pay as you earn, if your payment amount is more than what you would pay under the 10-year standard plan, you cannot enroll in those plans. You can enroll in repay, and this is, of course, you have to have a direct loan in order to enroll into repay, but you can enroll into repay even if your calculated payment amount would be more than the 10-year standard payment amount. However, you're going to pay more than the 10-year standard payment amount. One of the things that we didn't really talk about is that the 10-year standard payment plan is a qualifying plan for both IDR and public service loan forgiveness. So you may have reasons why you might want to do the 10-year standard plan. If you're consolidating, the 10-year plan is not really an option. So you're going to have to do, you're probably going to have to do repay in that circumstance.
Thanks, Persis. If someone completed the application for cancellation already, what is the next step in the process and when might they hear anything about the next decision?
So that's a really good question. And as many people may be aware that there have been a number of lawsuits filed challenging the president's debt cancellation program. Currently, the the Eighth Circuit has issued a stay in cancellation, and what all that means is that the parties have appealed, the parties challenging cancellation lost at the district court level, and then the plaintiffs in that case appealed to the Eighth Circuit. The Eighth Circuit put in a stay or a pause on the cancellation program until they can review the documents, until they can review the motion. So it's not a permanent injunction. It's not even actually an injunction at all. It is just a pause button. However, what it means is that the department is prevented at this moment from giving cancellation. They've announced they have been taking applications. You can still apply. You should get confirmation. From what we hear, people are getting that confirmation very quickly. They are processing the applications. They are getting the applications as close as they can to the moment where they can hit the button and, take the money off of your account. However, they're not yet able to do that. The president announced just this morning that they are ready, that they have processed as many as 16 million applications. So as soon as the stay has lifted, those cancellations can go through, but right now, because of the stay, they cannot do that. But if you have not applied and you do have eligible loans, and you're not going to consolidate them, or you're going to keep them eligible, apply as soon as possible, because you can get in the queue. They will start processing the applications, and then as soon as they're able to actually go through and discharge the debts, they have indicated that they will do so.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And if people need, they've listened to this presentation and they're still finding it a little confusing and they might need one-on-one help, where can they go?
That is an excellent question. And absolutely, there's, Amy and I have many years of trying to navigate this system. So of course, we're sending this out at the end. Feel free to go to cancellmystudentdebt.org. There's a lot of resources on there, some FAQs, but absolutely, there's definitely no way that every single borrower can get every single answer through a website. And some people are going to have really complicated situations. I know you all have had your loans for a very long time. So some resources where you can go. A number of states have what they're calling student loan ombuds. We do have that list of state ombuds on cancellmystudentdebt.org, so you can look for those links and how to get there from there. Also, if you are low income, I would encourage you to see if you have a legal services program in your area that's able to provide assistance as well. So, there are also resources for where to get more resources on cancellmystudentdebt.org. So hopefully everyone is able to find someone who can help them navigate the process.
Amazing. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, last question.
Okay, and this is a good one to ask. So someone is asking about what if they consolidated their loans with their spouse? What is going on in the world of spousal consolidation?
Yes, that is an excellent question. And so for those who don't know what these loans are, I think the consensus is this was a terrible loan product. But up until 2006, there was a product where you and your spouse could consolidate your loans together, but they contained the term that said that even in the case of divorce or disillusionment or separation, that these loans could not be separated. Thankfully, just very recently, Congress passed and the president signed the Joint Consolidation Separation Act, which has given the Department of Education the authority to separate the loans. Now, the very short answer is they're working on a process to actually separate those loans. For public service loan forgiveness, what they have said that borrowers can do is, for now, fill out a PSLF application and then submit it. They're going to get denied, but also submit simultaneously this request for reconsideration, and then identify the fact that you have a joint consolidation loan. That is the way that you can kind of get in line to get credit for the PSLF waiver. They have not told us yet what they are going to do for folks who want to take advantage of the IDR account adjustment. Obviously, we are mindful of the date that May is not as far off as we'd like to think that it is. So hopefully we will get that guidance for you as soon as possible. We will put it on cancellmystudentdebt.org. And hopefully we have a real process so that these loans can be actually separated and folks can just start to move on with their lives. We will again keep you updated on our website, but thank you so much for all of these wonderful questions. I think they're very insightful, and thank you for maintaining your attention through this evening long webinar. We appreciate all of you, and we will be sending out the notes, the slides rather. So thank you and have a great evening. Take care, folks. Bye.